Hello, everybody. Hopefully this is all working and I am live. Please let me know in the chat if you can hear me. I don't do a lot of live streams, so I'm always a little bit nervous that this isn't working out. So just confirm for that, and then we will proceed with our very first question time here at Virtual Legality. We can see a couple of people. While everybody's getting settled, how's your Saturday morning? We hear you loud and clear. That's all I need. I need one person to tell me that you can hear me, because otherwise I feel like I'm talking into the darkness, or that my computer has changed the gain on my microphone. And I think you've all heard a couple of the videos where that's happened, where I've been on a Zoom call or I've been on a Discord or something else, and the Windows system changes up exactly what the gain on that microphone is. So hopefully everybody's doing great this morning, and hopefully this is a decent time for at least some of you that are checking out the channel and maybe getting some questions answered. I do want to say thank you to everybody who has helped me figure out how to support the channel, how to get out there a little bit more after we had a little bit of nervousness and trepidation with YouTube coming after one of our old videos and about topics that we had talked about in the interim since that video went live. So since then, we've gotten some great support. We've gotten some great areas where we have put the videos and gotten them out there in different ways. One of which is what we're doing today, which is the Patreon. I've got up the Patreon page here for Virtual Legality because Question Time is actually a benefit, a tier perk, whatever you want to call it, on the Patreon level for the $10 and up support for the channel. And thankfully, I'm very blessed to say we've got a number of people that are supporting the channel at that level. And that's great. That being said, none of them submitted questions for this very video. So for those of you that aren't supporting at that level or just like to see Virtual Legality, want to talk about what we talk about in this space, you're in luck because we actually don't have any questions to fill the time. And we have pledged to talk to the community more due to all the great support that we've gotten. And I've really been blown away by the number of people that have commented, that have otherwise bought shirts or mugs or are patrons on the Patreon. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I really appreciate everybody that does that. So I did want to say, as part of this, that this is part of that Patreon tier. This is part of that support. If you want to make sure you get a question answered as part of one of these videos in the future, that $10 support level does lead to that. And as you've seen at the end of our videos, we try to do it pretty quickly. It's not about supporting the channel. It's about the topics that we're talking about here in this space. But we do have Patreon, we do have Streamlabs, we do have the store, and we might get a membership button directly on YouTube pretty soon. They actually have a lot of hoops to jump through and a lot of bells and whistles and things that I haven't yet had the time to do while I try to do the channel as well as run a law firm. With that out of the way, let's talk about a few things. If anybody has any specific questions, I saw a few that kind of came up here early on. I don't know that I can see the whole chat here, so if you had a question and I missed it, please consider asking it again. The only rules here are that, I reserve the right if something gets too personal to not answer it. This isn't an Ask Me Anything. And then the more important one in terms of my not getting disbarred is that I can't answer, your specific legal question if your cousin got a DUI and is currently calling from the jailhouse, or if you have a corporate merger or acquisition that is specific to you. Call me up in my day job. We can absolutely talk about it from a legal perspective, but I can't talk about the specifics of your individual circumstance on YouTube. Generally speaking, you shouldn't ask the YouTube channel for your legal advice, and a good lawyer is going to sit down with you and give you better advice than you can get through a method like this one. With those rules out of the way, happy to talk about really anything. I'm watching a few shows. WandaVision's very popular. I'm playing a few games, and obviously we did a lot of videos this month. It's been a crazy month of videos, so I also thought we could talk if anybody had anything that they wanted clarified, any updates I try to update stories here in Virtual Legality when there are major changes. There are a few that I really just wasn't able to cover because there was so much news and so many topics to cover in videos in Virtual Legality that I just couldn't hit every update. So we can talk about Valve getting dragged into releasing some of their information over to Apple in Epic versus Apple, some other things that might have happened that we didn't get a chance to cover in a full video, either because I just didn't have the time or because it probably would have been a 3-minute video, and I tried to make them a little bit more substantive than that. So let's see what we've got here in the chat. Finally getting the chance to watch Hoeg live. I'm at work, though, so that might be short-lived. I've watched a few streams live from work, generally the easy allies, but it's a little bit easier working from home, I have to admit. I'm facing life in prison for being too handsome. Is there anything that you can do for me? Yeah, I'm wondering about the jurisdiction that tries to bar handsomeness. It seems like that would be a downward spike in your society. I think handsomeness should be complimented and incentivized. So good luck to you. I can't help. It sounds like a personal legal problem. Yes, WandaVision. Let's just talk about that instead. Sure, no spoilers. I think WandaVision is an absolutely fantastic addition to the MCU. I was not convinced about Elizabeth Olsen back when she was originally hired for Age of Ultron, and I'm fully happy to admit when I'm wrong. She's been just tremendous on that show, and it's a really, really interesting thing that they're doing over on Disney+. What was the first video game that really got you into gaming, Rick? Wow. So I'm older than a lot of my audience, I would say, but I was playing video games really early on. I was playing in television. I was playing Atari 2600. I was playing all those various things. I think we might have even had some older stuff in front of the TV. But the first game where I really gelled with, wow, this is quite the medium. I'm enjoying this as much as anything else that I'm doing, is probably Final Fantasy IV, which is Final Fantasy II, Super Nintendo game here in the United States. And that was the first time I can remember thinking that the medium could really be something special and convey those emotions and convey everything else that you want to see when you're experiencing a story and the power of stories, even with little pixel people. And I'd played a bunch of games before that, including the original Final Fantasy, The Legend of Zelda, Super Mario, Duck Hunt, all these awesome games, and they're all great. But the first time where I said to myself, wow, video games can really be something, I think is probably Final Fantasy 2/4. Hey Hoeg, didn't get the chance to see this in your previous vids, but been following you since Sid Alpha mentioned you in his recent video on Dirty Devs. I didn't know that he did. Well, I'm always thankful for YouTube folks commenting, using the stuff we do here in Virtual Legality. I have found that it's an excellent way to kind of have additional information. There are a lot of people that take little snippets from Virtual Legality or concepts from here or send people over, and I'm always appreciative of that. And I think what's really nice about that is a lot of the people, you don't need to agree with them on everything, that there's a good kind of healthy discourse amongst YouTube law. There's a lot of things that you see referenced in Virtual Legality on Legal, and I'm very thankful for that, obviously, because he has such a big audience. And Lawful Masses with Leonard French, and some other places. And I really think that's fun. And certainly there are people that are focused on video games that take what we do here and they put them out there because, honestly, there aren't a lot of lawyers spending their time talking about these things either on Twitter or social media or on YouTube because, to be honest with you, from a monetary perspective, it's not the most efficient return on investment for your law degree, but I love this stuff. And so that's why you see me talking about it. And I love having these conversations with people and hopefully helping folks, including journalists, just can kind of understand a little bit better what's happening with corporate machinations and things, because sometimes that can get lost in the wash because there are these kind of procedural things that don't necessarily mean anything. When we did a video talking about how when Microsoft is going to buy ZeniMax, they're going to drop down a subsidiary, and they revealed to the European Union it was going to be called Vault. A couple of articles went up that said ZeniMax is changing its name to Vault, and so we did I think it was a 10 or 12-minute video saying here's how mergers work, and hopefully that's kind of a useful thing. That's where I feel like there's really maximal value from somebody that does this, that looks at corporate organization and can say, well, that's a non-story. Don't worry about any of that. That's all just kind of making sure it all works as a merger. But that's where I really feel like virtual legality can be valuable. And it's because of people like you asking the questions here in chat, otherwise enjoying the channel, and supporting it, that we can do those kinds of things. Let's see here. And I'm just plucking these out here. We do have super chat. If you want to get highlighted, I'm not trying to be a shill here, but they are coming fast and furious. And so it's when I end a question that I look over and see what is up here. So I apologize for that. Louis says, give me a Valve Apple Epic update. They have a case management hearing, I think, next week. I won't be covering that. I think some people get confused about this here at Virtual Legality a little bit. I'm not a litigator. If you don't know any lawyers, or if you don't know any law firms, like most things in the year 2021, law has moved into specialized groups, right? So there's transactional attorneys, and there's litigators, really at the broadest scope. But transactional attorneys can be everything that doesn't involve a direct dispute in court. Can be, employment law, intellectual property law. We talk about that a lot in this space. But it's not when the swords come out and people start fighting. So I'm not going to cover case management. I would be more dangerous than useful talking about the specifics of the procedure there. But you also saw we did a video on the fact that Apple has been going around as part of discovery, as well as Epic has been, undoubtedly, and going and trying to collect information that they're going to bring in to talk about this antitrust lawsuit. And as we've talked about in that series now, at whatever 30 videos that it has in it, antitrust is a weird area because you don't necessarily have, the man shot him, we have the gun, and we have the bullets, and we can explain this. Instead, you have to make these economic arguments, and you have this battle of the experts. Because generally speaking, different economists can have different views on what effects something like Epic being in the marketplace or the App Store being limited to only Apple will have, as well as what the second order effects are if you eliminate that, right? Apple will undoubtedly have an expert that comes in and says, hey, we made this phone to get this return on investment. We deserve that return on investment. It might go away, and not even just Apple, but Android or whomever. And you don't want to disincentivize competition in the mobile space in order to maybe help competition in the App Store space down the road. And I'm not saying that's the right answer. Epic will undoubtedly have an expert that says the opposite. But you see how a judge who maybe doesn't even have the same technological background as you or I can look at these things and say, well, all right, we've got two well-credentialed people from different schools of thought. When your billions of dollars are on the line, you can go find some kind of economist that agrees with you because there's just that many human beings on Earth. It's not nefarious or anything. And now what do I do with this kind of counter information? Now, fortunately for the trial judge, chances are something like this will be appealed. So there are additional bites of the apple for both sides, but that's what makes it so expensive and time consuming. So you did see as part of the discovery process that Apple asked for this information from Valve. Valve said we're not part of that market, which is why I said, well, they're really fighting Epic's fight in this. The court actually wound up giving a modified information disclosure right under subpoena to Apple. I think it was reduced by a few games. I think the time frame for the information that has to be provided is a little bit reduced. The aggregate information, which I said in that video was the easier for Apple to get, that was granted, but I believe modified in terms of its parameters again. So I think broad scope, Apple won that. Valve has to turn over certain bits of information, but it was modified to make it a little bit more palatable to Valve. So that's the update right now. Hi, Hoeg. Question, is there any chance we see an Uncivil Law versus Hoeg Law debate anytime soon? Uncivil Law has contacted me. We have been in touch in the past. For whatever reason, we've tried to organize discussions a couple of times around Supreme Court decisions and things of that nature. It has fallen apart. Sometimes my fault, sometimes his. We will see what we can do. In the busy world, sometimes it's just a little bit difficult to make those things happen, which is why you don't see a ton of collaborations on this channel. I try to make them happen when I can. But really, Virtual Legality was built around trying to make sure I could continue to do my day job and get information out there very timely around the news items as they appear. But that does mean that it's a little bit tricky to just be like, hey, I'm going to go live in 10 minutes. Can you get on? And lawyers just don't generally work that way. And then that's not at all Uncivil Law's fault or anybody else in YouTube law or anywhere else that you might think of, because I love having conversations with people. I love talking with people, but sometimes it's a little bit tricky to do when you're kind of trying to do it on the fly. Let's see. Did you watch the congressional hearing for Robinhood? Any new thoughts, concerns in light of it? So I did watch bits and pieces. It was during a time when I think I'd had a closing, so I didn't watch it in full. I mostly got what I think a lot of people got, which is the clip show on Twitter and elsewhere. And certainly a lot of those clips and things of people talking, Maxine Waters and elsewise, tend to be what I get worried about with congressional hearings, which is from both sides. It's not a Republican or Democrat thing. It's grandstanding. You know, to some extent, the questions are speeches from the politicians and designed to make people uncomfortable. I wasn't impressed by the Robinhood CEO. Generally speaking, from a CEO position, you want to have a little bit more force, but we aren't seeing that from the tech companies as much. So that might just be the new lay of the land. But I wasn't impressed with his answers, but nor was I really impressed by the politicians. It seems as much as anything to show that the politicians want to indicate to the people that they're doing something. And it would be interesting to see what happens from there, because I didn't think it was a terribly fruitful conference, as best I could tell, in terms of getting additional information and finding out what else needed to be regulated, if anything. In your opinion, what's the biggest lawyer cliche you can debunk? We love wearing suits. Some lawyers do. But in 2021, like most jobs, a lot of our practice really isn't shining shoes and wearing suits and walking around glass and metal buildings, although there certainly are law firms that do that. So maybe this isn't even a cliche I can debunk as much as it's a cliche I can debunk for Southeast Michigan and Hoeg Law. But I think a lot of people, when they think about hiring lawyers or working with lawyers, there's a bit of a barrier. And it's not just the barrier that he's gonna run the clock as soon as I meet with him, and now I owe him $40,000 or whatever. It's not just that. It's that lawyers have long time presented themselves as other, right? Well, we're the people in suits, and we're gonna come in and we're gonna explain things to you, and we're not your business. And certainly in my line of work, I've found it to be more fruitful to wear, business casual, maybe one notch above that, to have conversations for people to realize that lawyers are not just people, which is kind of virtual legality and my Twitter presence and showing that lawyers are human beings and it's going to be useful to talk to them like that, but also that the relationship is close enough that you're willing, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small business owner, to talk about the warts of your business. It's much like a relationship with a doctor. You need to be able to tell them not just what's working out well, but what's working out not so well, because in every instance in law, it's going to be cheaper to fix it before it becomes a real problem. And oftentimes I'm working with clients that come to me after it's become a real problem, and I have to tell them, well, it's going to be this expensive because now you're facing the spotlight of whatever it is, a transaction or government regulatory agency. And if we had done this before, that might have been a little bit more useful. So the cliche I would say is you want your clients to believe in you and to have you as part of the team. And oftentimes that means not wearing a suit, which I like. Certainly in 2020, 2021, it hasn't been big of an issue. Okay, we have a super chat here. Thanks for the content. I work 10 hours during my shift, and I have you playing in the background. Any plans of doing videos where you are actually in the video? Thank you for the question. If you go back and look, and I know we have, 550 videos up in Virtual Legality. I can't even tell you which ones. I have done videos where my face has appeared on stream. I don't have any problem with it. You can also see me in webinars and things online where my face appears on stream. You can look up my photo. I am not trying to hide from the world with this kind of stuff. What I found when I was trying to do that was that it added a little bit of extra time to organizing things, making sure everything was right, making sure I looked presentable. Not to say I'm, here in boxer shorts and a t-shirt in general during my workday, but in general look presentable. And then while I am trying to explain things from a legal perspective, actually focusing on the camera was taking a little bit away from the information that I was presenting. So ultimately, I might go back to it. It's not out of the question, but I was finding it was slowing me down enough that I wouldn't do a video when I really think I should have. And so I just eliminated it from the setup as of right now. If people keep coming to me and saying, they'd really like that, we'll see. I don't know that it adds that much from my perspective. So I'm kind of 50-50 on it, but that's really why it stopped. I think, like I said, you can see a couple, I think a couple times that Legal has had me on. I've sent him video clips of it as a face because that's what he asked for. So it's not that I'm against it. It's just a matter of time and making sure I can get as much information as possible out to you, while, not sinking my law firm. Let's see. Where does reasonable minds can differ come from? And is it trademarked or copyrighted? I always forget the difference, even after all the times you've explained it. Hey, that just is great for me. I can just explain it again, and it'll be another video. No, it's not trademarked. It's not intellectual property protected. I don't think I coined it, to be honest with you. It came from the fact that I had apparently, and my community usually tells me this more than even I notice it, I had apparently said it a ton of times in the first, 150 videos on virtual legality, because it's philosophically what I believe. I don't know how much you have all gone into my background and looked at my website history, but I went to two very kind of political institutions in my higher education. I went to Hillsdale College, which you'll see give advertisements on Fox News and things. I went there for their economics department because they have very highly rated economics. It was right near where I lived, and I don't regret it for 1 second, but they're also known as a pretty conservative school. Immediately following going to Hillsdale, I went to the University of Michigan Law School, which I got in, had to go. I've loved Michigan my whole life. And it's a top 10 law school. And it is very, very liberal in political orientation. And through both of those things, the joke I like to give is at Hillsdale, people thought I was a crazy liberal, as I believe I was described at Hillsdale. And at Michigan, a lot of people thought I was very conservative. So it's one of those areas where, from a political perspective, I like to, as I say on this channel, follow Fox and Vox. I like to get both sides of a given perspective and have those conversations. You see that kind of coming to roost in some of the things that I do in virtual legality. We try to stay out of politics for the most part because I think it takes away from the conversation. But certainly the stuff we did just this week with the Hogwarts Legacy controversy and things like that wind up having this discussion of what's appropriate and when's it okay to just kind of bar thoughts and ideas. And in general, philosophically, I'm very much of the mind that reasonable minds can differ, and that's how you have the conversation. You can survive at both Hillsdale and Michigan Law School, by being reasonable and listening to people. And that doesn't mean you have to agree with them. In fact, I don't agree with probably most of the people that I come across in both locations and now, but it's still important to recognize the inherent humanity in someone, and that most people want to advance the world, want to make the world a better place. They disagree on how to do it. And it's still important to have that conversation in every instance. So that's reasonable minds can differ. It's not unique to me. Hopefully it's not unique to me. I hope I'm not the only person in the country or in the world that has that kind of thought. But it's not otherwise intellectual property copyrighted, trademarked. It would probably be a trademark for this purpose. Copyright, it's not art. It doesn't have a separate kind of notion. It would be a trademark. And who knows? If we get big enough, maybe we'll trademark it. And thank you very much to Sicario Camisato for the $5 super chat. He sent a GIF that says "good job." That's not a question, but I am very thankful for it anyway. So much appreciated. Let's see. Somebody said, "Hi, it was totally unintended. You used it so often, I thought for sure it was like a motto for you," which I guess in some ways it is. Yeah. I'm a first principles kind of guy. I like to think through issues, as you can probably tell in virtual legality, fulsomely, certainly before I comment on them. And that has led me to a life of listening to a lot of people with a lot of different ideas. I think that is how you grow and get better. And so, that's why it's on the shirts. Some people have asked for it on a mug. I'm going to try to make that happen. Yeah, I mean, I really fully believe in that concept. And if you can't tell in virtual legality, I get a little bit agitated when people kind of move outside that concept and try to quash it, either in the comments to these videos or in the videos directly. You seem a bit to the right of me politically, but I certainly think you're even-handed. Yeah, and I think, certainly right and left is an interesting concept, right, Louis? Like it jurisdictionally, that matters. Like what is right and left in the U.S. and right and left in Europe and in various places where people are watching virtual legality is different. It's one of the reasons I try to avoid labels. It's not It's not to be, pretentious. It's because it does make such a big difference where you are, what your political stripe is personally. And so, I do think labels are potentially an issue. But you can see certain what people might describe as political kind of thrusts in the stuff we talk about in virtual legality. I generally believe in freedom of contract more than some jurisdictions. And that's kind of a political stance, I guess. And certainly different people can have different thoughts. Reasonable minds can differ on a topic like that. But it's not talking about whatever the political hot button issue of the day is. And hopefully I'm consistent on a foundational level there. What if you write it with artsy letters? Oh, for trademarking it? Typeface is something that you can trademark separately from just the words. Absolutely. Do you have any series like the Raw Fury publishing and developing an agreement on the works at the moment? No, I don't. I have to say I want to get done with that one first. The original mission was to do one of those a week. Some of the news and some of my day job stuff has come up so often that I haven't been able to do that fully. But I really like it. I really think that is a value add here on Virtual Legality, is to have a kind of evergreen repository of a lawyer that does commercial transactions going over a document of this type. So it's possible that we'll do a similar thing, maybe a privacy policy, website terms and conditions, something like that hopefully just gives tremendous value to people that are looking to have somebody discuss these things with them. And I owe 3 more substantive videos finishing off the Raw Fury document, and then a 10th conclusion one, which I'm hopeful I can get a guest for. We will see. But after that, if you guys have thoughts, if the community has thoughts, if you want to put them in a community post answer or in a comment to some video, generally speaking, I will see it. Sometimes it gets a little lost if things get busy at the channel. But if you have an idea for a long form series, doesn't have to be 10 parts, Lord knows. 10 parts might have been biting off a bit more than I could chew. I'm going to try to make sure I get it done in Q1 of this year. But if you have an idea for something that's big and could be useful to people, absolutely send it along, because I would love to hear about it. We have a super chat from Caleb Bailu. Have you learned anything from doing YouTube videos that you have applied to law firm side of your business? That's a great question. One of the things that I wanted to do back when I was really getting into this in 2018 was I had a number of clients that were dabbling in things like YouTube and social media and other things like it. And I'm a curious person, as you can probably tell. I wanted to go in and find out what they were getting in terms of a user experience, what kind of data they were getting, how hard it was. I am still very surprised that streaming something like we're doing here in Question Time, or that you might see on Twitch, is as mechanically difficult as it is. I would have thought that applications and things would have figured out a way to one button do this so that more people can jump in. It isn't as easy as I would have thought. So in terms of that, I got into it to better connect with certain of my clients. And it is undoubtedly the case that working through YouTube, working on marketing the law firm, or just presenting my personality on places like Twitter, and how people have to deal with that, what you want to say, what you need to kind of think twice about saying, given the temperament of some folks in various aspects of social media, is very, very useful to me in terms of advising my clients, a lot of whom are small businesses trying to figure out how to market their place of business. Certainly in terms of operating the law firm, finding a way to get what I call from farm to table on these videos while still operating the firm, still practicing law, is something that you'd be surprised. A number of law firms have asked me about. Some really big law firms have said, hey, you're doing this in virtual legality. Can you come in and talk to our folks about that? And I'll probably be pursuing some of those opportunities in the future, because I think this is useful. I think this is enormously useful. I have long thought that the justice system, the legal system, lawyers, that barrier prevents people from getting good, efficient legal advice, from interacting with lawyers, from understanding the rules of the game of the world around them in a way that they shouldn't. You shouldn't have to go to law school to understand some of the stuff we talk about in virtual legality, which is why we talk about it in virtual legality. But hopefully stuff like this, I don't want to get too grand and aspirational, but hopefully successes like virtual legality can help more people get out there and have conversations about law and their professions, and have these kinds of interactions, because I think they are enormously useful. Let's see. What else we got? Epic versus Apple would make a good long firm. Sarcasm. Yes, indeed. I have no idea what the last video number will be on Epic versus Apple. We are going to cover the lawsuit when it happens in May, but I haven't figured out how exactly. We're certainly not going to do it, every day. We might take some secondary sources, some summary materials from various places and talk through how people are describing the lawsuit until, of course, we get to an opinion. We'll go through the opinion in its entirety. But the lawsuit process, the actual trial process, probably not too useful to give you the blow by blow. So we'll see exactly what that winds up looking like. Did you see the reports about the amounts that Google was paying to, for example, Ubisoft and Rockstar to release their games on Stadia? The report said $20 million per title. No, Louis, I didn't see that. They were paying it for development or just right off the top. That's interesting. The Google Stadia thing, that was one of those that was on a list a couple of weeks here in February of like 7 things. I just had to take the top one that I thought was the most important and do it in virtual legality. The Stadia going under. In the videos that we did when Stadia was announced and how it was announced and Phil Harrison's involvement, how they were talking about it, I think it always felt like there wasn't going to be necessarily this backing that you needed to have at the Google level. And Google is pretty notorious for having great ideas, coming up with random stuff, Google Glass, what have you, and ditching them when they're not immediate, monstrous, volcanic successes. And then when Stadia kind of hit the ground and wasn't quite running, you got worried. And now this is probably, in my opinion, the kind of worst case scenario, which is that they bought up all these assets. They made these things exclusive. I think Pixel Junk just announced a Stadia exclusive. And they really kind of canceled the Stadia project before most of it came to fruition. So it's kind of a dead man walking situation with games that are made exclusively for it. So I guess I'm not surprised that they were throwing bags of money around. I am a little bit surprised that they couldn't even last, a year, focused on the Stadia project. Kaz has Band-Aids with a super chat. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it very, very much. Huge fan. Been playing video games since 1994, and the content you make is some of the best stuff I have seen in a while. Keep up the great work. I really, really appreciate it. 1994. Yeah, in 94, that's right around. We were just talking about in our Grand Theft Legislature video, the Night Trap and Mortal Kombat hearings. Your life is a mix of all these experiences and memories that you have. And people ask me how virtual legality exists, and I feel like I give 50 answers because there's so many things that went into it. But certainly the combination of my love of video games and some of my disdain for congressional hearings and the way they handle some of these questions comes from, as a kid, and you can believe this or not, I was actually watching these things when other people were watching like cartoons, watching the Senate hearings, having played those games. My parents allowed me to play Mortal Kombat when I was a kid, and laughing in their face, really, being like, this is ridiculous on its face that they're spending their time doing this. They don't understand it. If you go and you look at the transcript of the descriptions of what Night Trap is, and then you go play Night Trap on your Switch or wherever else you want to play it, I think there's remakes on all the systems, you will laugh at what Senator Lieberman or whomever is describing is the game of Night Trap. And that just kind of led me in a certain direction of like wanting to know exactly how these things work and whether or not they would actually regulate based on these completely erroneous presumptions about video games, which of course haven't really gone away. There's a reason our most recent video is about an Illinois representative threatening to ban violent video games, which, yes, is unconstitutional. And of course, as a lawyer, or if you're used to it in virtual legality, I talk about it for 30 minutes when the answer is, can they do this? No. But I really do wish that this kind of thought process would go away and that people would do their homework a little bit more. Let's see here. I definitely agree some of the stuff taught in law school. I found myself thinking, why the hell didn't high school teach me this? Yeah, I mean, I think lawyers like to fancy themselves superhumans in certain respects, right? And so you hear that, think like a lawyer, or this is what I learned in law school, etc. And in respect of that, I think that's not the way it should be, especially with laws that are going to put you in jail or going to increase your taxes, whatever it might be. People need to know how those rules operate. And One of the things that law school really changed for me, and I wish it would have been done a little bit earlier, so I agree with that, is thinking about how systems work. That, stopping at a red light or stopping at a stop sign, that's not inherent to humanity. That's not an inherent state of being. And thinking about how that system came to be and how that light came to be on that corner, and then just branching that out to everything. How those signs are allowed on the side, and then to every system everywhere. That's the fun. I mean, that's what virtual legality is talking about systems, whether they're contractual or philosophical or political, and how they interact to make the world the way it is today. Let's see here. Why do my homework when you do such a good job of doing it all for me? It's a fair question. One thing, I had a comment the other day here in Virtual Legality that was, I don't check out a news item until I see what you've had to say about it, et cetera, and you're my favorite source. And I love that, and I'm very appreciative of that. I like to think I'm pretty smart on these kinds of topics, but I will say this. Other people are going to disagree with me, and that's okay. You put 5 lawyers in a room on a topic, you'll probably get 4 answers. There might be 2 that agree with each other. And that process in and of itself, hearing the disagreement, hearing the conversation, enormously useful. Maybe you wind up siding with me more than the other lawyers. Maybe you wind up siding with someone else or the other commentator if it's just on video games or what have you. But I love that process of looking at different sources, considering what they are saying, considering their motivations. One of the things you see us discuss in articles and with respect to messaging is tilt. Right? We try to identify who is this person, what would they gain from saying this thing, not because they're being disingenuous, but because that's a useful piece of the puzzle. One of the things I was potentially thinking about doing a video on, and it might be the time has passed, was I saw Tom Scott did a video on advertising and why things like YouTube has to put up sponsorship posts. And the reason for that is because you want to identify biases. And historically, as a society, there have been uses of references to Pepsi or what have you that people can look at and know that they are sponsored, when it isn't the case with influencers and just somebody talking into a microphone on YouTube. And so there is that difference. There is a reason why the FTC has certain requirements for influencers and not certain requirements in other instances. I was thinking about doing a video like that, just got by me because I was doing other stuff and I had some law in the day job. But it's important to have that kind of distinction and to know exactly where somebody is coming from. Just to play devil's advocate, why would banning violent video games be unconstitutional? Because the United States First Amendment pretty much prohibits government from restricting things based on the content contained therein outside of really, really compelling circumstances. So almost all instances of content-based restrictions are going to get kicked by the court. Let's see. The Tom Scott video is the first of my recommendations right now. Maybe I should do a response video. I don't think he's wrong necessarily. I think it's just, like most things, I think that there's more nuance and context that can be given. It's not really as draconian or as negative as Tom Scott might otherwise reflect. So is every gun law in the books, but that doesn't stop them. Or a little politics, a little politics. Congress shall make no law is an interesting thing, because one of the things you learn in law school is that while the English is Congress shall make no law, it seems pretty on its face. We know what that means. The courts have stepped in and said Congress shall make no law except, basically, unless it's really compelling for the government. And that applies for the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and everything else. And I think a strict textualist reading of those amendments might suggest that that's not right. But an originalist reference, where you see and you look at the Constitution being adopted and you see that states had blasphemy laws and things at the time, suggests that Congress shall make no law wasn't really meant that way. So you get these interesting philosophical conversations, and certainly ones that impact us in our daily lives. I'm not trying to undersell that. But as a lawyer, not necessarily thinking about the impacts, it's a very interesting kind of logical discussion to be had. It's perfectly legal, for example, for Walmart not to stock violent video games, or Sony or Microsoft to reject them. Absolutely. Private actors. Different from the government, right? California tries to pass a law banning violent video games or the sales of them to minors, gets kicked out. If Illinois somehow passed this bill, and I don't think they will, it would get kicked out. Same reason. Doesn't mean that the Esrb can't put ratings on things, say it shouldn't be sold to children. Doesn't mean that GameStop can say, I'm not stocking that game, I'm not selling it. Much like we've talked about with Epic versus Apple, a storefront gets to choose what it does. And that's one of the problems with the Epic versus Apple theory, is saying, hey, you own this storefront, you're a monopoly in that storefront access, and we should be able to make you do certain things. That's part of that conversation, definitely. Let's see here. Good morning. I hope your weekend is treating you well so far. I've been a fan of yours for the better part of a year now and wanted to let you know, keep up the great work. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. ESRB is a self-regulating body, right? Yes. Although, the ESRB was created basically under threat from the government saying, you better do something or else we'll do it for you. There is kind of an open question that might come to the fore more in the next 10 or 15 years about when government threatens a private entity or an industry, and then they do something, how voluntary is that under United States law? And I think the reason that might come to the fore is you start to see these conversations in Congress about, there was a couple of representatives that posted a letter that said, I think it was DirecTV should kick off Fox News and some other news sources. And you get that kind of thought process in congressional hearings that Facebook should do these things that the government couldn't do itself, right? The government couldn't ban Fox News. The government couldn't eliminate these messages on Facebook. If they start to encourage DirecTV or Facebook or whomever to do these kinds of things, when is the line where effectively you've co-opted a private actor to do something that would be prohibited by the government through effectively threats of regulation in this case? That's going to be an interesting thing, and I think it's going to be a continued point of conversation into the future. So very, very interesting in my opinion. Honestly, if the bill passes, the only game that would be viable to play is Penn and Teller's Desert Bus. I don't know. I think you hit a fly. I know that's an insect, but it's unclear what the Illinois legislature means by animal in that particular law. So it could go either way. How long does each video take to make? For every minute of video, how much preparation is there? Hugely, hugely variable, have to say. And you could probably tell that from the discussed in this episode section. If you want like a proxy, the longer that goes, the longer it took to prep. And the shorter that is, the shorter it took to prep. But for the most part, the process is, depending on when I have calls during my day, is, I wake up, I look at the news stories, or if I have a list of things that I want to hit, I start putting together my sequence for the video and thinking about what I want to talk about. And then I get it done. I get it taped. I get it edited if I have things that need to be edited and up. And then farm to table, if I'm doing things right, and it's not always this way, it's about 3 hours. And that's why you can get some of those quick reactions. I know a number of people come into the comments and respond as to how quickly I can talk about news items. But that was really the purpose of setting it up the way I had. There are a number of places in the first 100 videos or so of Virtual Legality where you could see it was taking me longer, it wasn't working in my workday, and you weren't getting that kind of big reaction. So I've gotten that really shortened down. I've gotten all my buttons right. I've gotten this process down to where it needs to be in order to fit within my schedule. And that's why you see that happen. Now, sometimes it's a lot longer. You've got a lawsuit when I want to do cross-references and things like that, when you see one of those like 2-hour videos. Obviously, it took 2 hours to talk about, and then it was probably 4 or more hours prepping it before that. So I really have to have the time to do it, which is why you don't always see those kinds of videos on the same day that the news drops. Who do you like more, Legal or your favorite copyright attorney, Leonard French? Super chat from Mike B. I like them both. It's interesting. I think Legal has taken his channel in a much more political direction, which in general I try to avoid here because I like to have a conversation that maybe isn't as colored by the politics of the day. But he does such a good job. He's grown his channel leaps and bounds. I think he's got 500,000 subscribers in the last 3 months or something along those lines. Some of that's network effect. He crosses 1 million and he gets all that. He gets all that growth, but I think that's fantastic. He's been a big supporter of this channel, and I have to say, to his credit, he found out about me. If you go back and look at my videos, from a video where I said Legal is, I think I said mostly or partly wrong when we were talking through the COPPA issues on YouTube, and so he found me, and he commented on that video, and we talked, and I think that's. To be honest with you, I think that's really a testament to him, that effectively getting a video that says you're wrong on these kinds of things, he not only takes in good faith, he then adopts some of those points and references the channel back in subsequent videos that he does on that topic afterwards. And I think everybody could be well advised to do more of that rather than just having, an attack on each other's character. Leonard French, I love. I can never pull off the hats that he wears, excuse me, in a lot of his videos. But I think he's great, and he does a very focused kind of thing, really talking about intellectual property. If you get into one of those areas where the specifics really matter and the details matter, I'd probably send you over to Leonard French, because he's doing that on the day-to-day basis more than I am. I'm a transactional attorney, so I'm dealing with intellectual property all the time, and licenses and software, copyrights and trademarks and things. But he's looking at that from litigation and dispute perspective a lot, and I think he does a great job. I think the entire ecosystem of YouTube law, social media law, Twitter law, whatever it might be, I think really is useful in breaking down those barriers. And while I do think people can sometimes get heated, I think it is still enormously useful. And while I wouldn't go as political, and I won't go as political as Legal with his stuff, I think that he's reaching a very broad audience, that hopefully he's educating and informing, because I think that having that big an audience is a bit of a responsibility. And I think for the most part, he's done a good job with it. All right, let's see here. Okay. Oh, I got another super chat. Jay the Cat. Could you defeat Rudy Giuliani in a fist fight? That's a very interesting question. I probably wouldn't defeat Rudy Giuliani in a fist fight, because I probably wouldn't take up arms against him. I got the feeling like he's got some back alley brawls in his history that I just don't. But also, given his position, you just don't want the justice system to have to judge between you and the politically connected in general. Sorry for the cynicism there. But could I beat him? Probably. But I probably wouldn't take up arms in that particular question. Louis Proctor, favorite lawyer in a comedy TV show movie. Oh, that's easy. That's Marshall Erickson, Jason Segel in How I Met Your Mother. I go around singing better being a lawyer had better be awesome all the time. And there are some plot lines from a comedy perspective, obviously a little bit heightened in How I Met Your Mother, that are pretty close to home in his travels through the big law firms and partnerships, and how partners treat associates and various things, being tired and studying for the bar. And those natures. So I highly recommend it. I really enjoy Marshall Erickson on How I Met Your Mother. I used to really like Legal. I love Leonard. Do you think that the Supreme Court will uphold the 2011 opinion if the Illinois law passes and the ESA files suit again? Yes. Yeah, absolutely I do. Some people brought up in comments that you can't dismiss it this much because the court has changed and there were dissents and things like that. That's fair in as far as it goes. If you've got a borderline question, 5-4, maybe the reasoning wasn't that great. Everybody knows the reasoning isn't that great. I'm not going to really come at you in virtual legality and accuse you of breaching your oath of office like I do in that video with respect to Illinois. In this particular case, though, video games clearly art. It wasn't even combated in the California case in 2011 that they aren't subject to First Amendment protection, because that's a straight up loser. And prohibiting their sale entirely based on the content that they contain is never going to work in the Supreme Court, right or left. There might be some people on the edges that are a little bit more in loco parentis from the government, that the government should have this right to do it. I don't know. It would be guessing. But for almost all cases, both right and left on the court are going to agree that you don't ban content of this type. You can have potentially restrictions, time and manner, maybe getting up to something like a minor sale, even though that was in 2011. That was what was struck down. You might have different reasoning that you could use for that particular instance. And certainly you saw fights about whether obscenity could include violence as well as sexuality in that 2011 case. That might come up again. But overall, no. Just banning the sale of something based on its content on a broad base. And that's assuming the definition was actually narrowed. As we talked about, the definition is ridiculous as proposed right now in the bill in Illinois. But presuming the definition were narrowed, you're still not going to win that Supreme Court case. In my opinion, I think there's really no chance. Has the channel become I lost it. Has your channel become an inadvertent or purposeful marketing arm for your business? Not sure if people asked this already. Yeah, in 2018, I was finding out how social media worked. I I don't know how many of you know this story, but basically I had very much not liked The Last Jedi, which has become a bit of a political hot button, but it wasn't really politics that I was talking about with respect to The Last Jedi. I really didn't like it. And on my law firm blog, I posted an article about the failures of The Last Jedi. And this went viral. And I got to find places on the internet that I had never seen before, like Reddit and Tumblr. And some people started talking about it on YouTube, and they were doing analysis of like this essay. And there were people that were looking at desktops and iPads and like really low quality stuff, and they had however many views. I said, well, I can have this conversation on YouTube better, and I love to learn things. So let's go figure out what the buttons are. Let's go figure out exactly how I'm to do this. And in like the spring of 2018, I converted that essay into a series of videos. I think you'll see them at the very front end of the video kind of history on this channel. And I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then I left it. It was like, okay, I can do that now. I know what buttons to press. I know how to edit some things lightly. I'm no professional editor. And then November of 2018 came around, and over the summer I had been giving kind of legal commentary on video game stories to the Easy Allies in a segment they wound up calling Help Us Out Hoeg. And that was very well received. And I said, well, this is interesting. Why am I, just waiting for Kyle to email me? Maybe I could talk about these things on my own. So when in the fall of 2018, things slowed down. You're doing closings, you're doing deals. Sometimes they just get pushed to the next year. I had that happen on a couple, so I had some time. I said, all right, let's try to do this. You go look at Virtual Legality number 1 in fall of 2018. It's about whether you can sue over Fallout 76. So, things stay the same throughout the years. But that started to get a little bit of traction, and I said, oh, I like doing this. I like figuring out exactly how to do this, what buttons to press. If I told you some of the absolute poor man's process I was using in terms of using like Windows Music Video Maker and things in the early videos, you'd laugh. But all of that was in service to this notion that when I went out on my own, I worked in big law for 15 years or 14 years, whatever that number is. When I went out on my own and I wanted to market the firm, my plan was always to not just market my firm as smaller and cheaper than the bigger guys, but to actually be different in kind, to have more personality available on social media, to sponsor places like Easy Allies, like I did for 2+ years, and then to do things like this. So it was always a bit of marketing, but also because I thought it was important, and I thought people were getting things wrong in the stories that I was seeing and in kind of the general internet passion. So that's how it came to be. And yes, the channel has directed a number of clients to Hoeg Law, for which I am absolutely very, very thankful. And, as long as that keeps up, we're going to keep doing it. But certainly, the risks that YouTube has put on us, the reason, that we're having question time, the reason that we have a Patreon, that we're looking for that support, is that as this has grown, it has taken up 30-40% of my time in some work days, and has created a kind of 2 jobs approach where, if one job had to suffer, it would probably be the YouTube channel, because obviously it's not, it's not putting food on the table for my family in the same way as the law firm and things like that. So making sure that it kind of all works together and is of a similar place was something that was really, really, really important to me. So hopefully that answered your question. Let's see here if I scroll down. Oh, I got. Let's see here. Okay, for some reason the little blue ones don't show on my little chat bubble, so I apologize if I miss any of these super chats. Jay the Cat with a £2 super chat. Would you ever collaborate with Jim Sterling? I think the more appropriate question there might be, would Jim Sterling ever collaborate with me? I don't know if you saw when I did that article on the patents for Warner Brothers doing the Shadow of War, the Nemesis system patents. Jim Sterling found that article and sicked his people on it. And so, that was, I got a lot of comments about how I'm a corporate bootlicker and whatnot. So I guess the question is whether or not he would collaborate with me. I like to listen to all kinds of people. And certainly his shtick of being specifically consumer protective, is, I think, perhaps maybe one notch too simplistic for what are the structures in place and how consumer protection can actually be a part of those structures. But I would love to have that conversation. And certainly he has mentioned Virtual Legality and Hoeg Law a number of times on his channel, because he always pronounces my name wrong. which I always find amusing. But yeah, no, he's referenced us a number of times, and I'm always open to collaborations and debates and conversations of any stripe. So thanks for asking the question. Let's see here. Do you agree that one of the most accurate or informative courtroom movies is My Cousin Vinny? I do. My Cousin Vinny is fantastic. And for purposes of evidence and things like that. Highly recommended. And funny as all heck. So yeah, it's a very good representation of some of those aspects. In fact, if I'm not misremembering, I think in evidence class at the University of Michigan Law School, I think we actually talked about some of the reveal moments in the courtroom scenes in My Cousin Vinny. Do you like Rian Johnson's other movies? I liked Knives Out just fine. I'm a big time travel buff. I don't love Looper. And primarily I don't love Looper because you always have to hand wave with time travel stories, but it hand waves a little bit too much. And I'm sure your mileage may vary on these kinds of things. But in terms of paradoxes and cause and effect and what should change and whatnot, that's what really got me there. So, I really, really hate The Last Jedi. I think he's a gifted director. I love Ozymandias in Breaking Bad. I even like Fly in Breaking Bad. I think he's a gifted director. I would pair him with a good writer, and I'd be more than happy to have him direct whatever movie I was looking at, but I don't want him writing. Now, it looks like it's like 10:56, so it's going to be like a 5 or 10 minute warning here. So if you got really important questions, please, make sure you get them in. I'll try to get to what I can get to, but yeah, 5 or 10 minutes left on the stream. Thoughts on the new Superman movie? JJ has really lost me with the Star Wars, the Disney trilogy. I'm a little bit confused as to whether it's a reboot or a sequel or how much of a reboot it is. They did say that they thought Henry Cavill wanted to be Superman again. I don't know whether that's a done deal or not. So if it's a sequel, I don't trust JJ with sequels at all after Into Darkness and Rise of Skywalker. If it's a reboot, maybe. I think he did a nice job with Star Trek 2009, even though I wouldn't characterize it as Star Trek. So, we shall see. We shall see on the Superman. Let's see. TLJ was the beginning of success for many channels. Well, it certainly opened my eyes to what commentary was in this space, and so I think that was useful. There are a lot of rumors that Microsoft buys a Japanese video game studio, but Japan has laws that protects Japanese companies from foreign companies purchasing them. Can Microsoft get passes around these laws? Yeah, you can acquire anything anywhere. There are a lot of countries that have a lot of ownership provisions or board of directors requirements on them. Generally speaking, you can have a subsidiary that operates in Japan, call it Microsoft Japan, that has the proper board of directors, has the proper whatever it needs to be to make the regulations work. And I'm no expert on Japanese acquisition law. But in almost all cases, you can structure your corporation in some respect to make that happen if that's what you really want to have happen. Didn't see that. Why do lawyers name their law offices after themselves? I imagine you aren't the only lawyer that works at your office. It feels odd to work for someone that names a company after themselves. A bit of ego. Well, the truth is, so this is a rather medium length story. I had left with another partner from the big law offices where I had worked, and I had advocated to have a name that wasn't that. I'd wanted to be called, Vanguard or Forefront or something that was more like just specific to what we wanted to do. And essentially I was voted down by the other partners that wanted their name on the door. And then when that kind of fell apart, nobody's fault, still good friends with everybody involved. But when that fell apart, I had to get a business operating very quickly and move to a different location and get it set up. And this was just the easiest, in all honesty. So that's why it exists that way. And so it's a unique enough name. It's also kind of a perfectly worthwhile branding. Otherwise, I probably would have had it have a different name, but here we are. Okay. Louis Rossman's receding hairline with a super chat request. Thank you so much. What do you think it would take to legally consider Nvidia as monopoly and break them up? Well, I mean, first, it would take Department of Justice interest, which you'd have to see actually happen. Generally speaking, we haven't done breakups in the United States very often. And so it usually has to be something that the Department of Justice would consider as very, very bad. But I think in general, as we've talked about in virtual legality, you have to have a company that is not just a sole owner of power in a specific space, but is also seen in the United States, at least, as using it wrongly somehow. And you can go back in the past a little bit and say they acquired it wrongly in some fashion and get to the same place. But you really do need to make the case that something bad is happening right now before any antitrust laws are reformed, which might happen, as you've seen proposed in the U.S. Congress, that it has to hit the consumers. And if you can't show consumer harm, you've got a problem, which is one of the problems with Epic versus Apple is they continue to say, the consumers are harmed, and that's a tricky thing. They're going to have to get past as an evidentiary hurdle. Last couple of questions. Oh, snap, Hoeg Live, question mark. I can answer that one. Yes, we are live. What advice would you give someone from a legal standpoint who is considering streaming? It depends on what you're streaming. Certainly you want to get acquainted with the intellectual property laws. A lot of people use fair use and those kinds of discussions a little bit more broadly than they are intended. I always recommend as a lawyer to be more on the cautious side than the generous side, because if you get that cease and desist, you get an angry lawyer from a law firm, bad things can happen. But in the same breath, certainly we've done videos that talk about people abusing the DMCA and things that are also trying to keep commentary and spoilers and things down in a way that is unfair. So I would recommend if you're just going to go talking about things that you just know kind of what intellectual property you can use from other people. And if you're going to stream video games or other people's stuff, that you try to go make sure that you're licensed to do that. I've got an article on VGC that you can check out that talks about, in respect of, I think it was the Capcom video policy, about how the video game industry needs to get better about licensing out the rights to stream, because otherwise they kind of reserve this right to hit you with an anvil if they don't like you. And I don't think that's very good. No one likes Rick confirmed. I don't know the context for that, but who can disagree with that kind of thing? Also, does Lewis know you use his name? It's just the name that he has on the chat. What's your current solo game? This will be the last question. What's your current multiplayer game? I just finished 13 Sentinels, like really, really recently, like as in last night. So that was my solo game. Absolutely adored it. Couldn't recommend it more. I think it's on sale on the PlayStation Store. They probably should owe me some royalties for how much I say I love it. No, I'm not being paid, YouTube or FTC or whomever else. 13 Sentinels, absolutely great. Very, very weird, but they land the plane at the end. The ending is actually really, really nice. Couldn't recommend it more. If you're looking for value for your dollar, I think I finished at 52 plus hours. So that was my solo game. Have to figure out what my solo game is going to be next, I think. And then in terms of multiplayer right now, I've got the demo for, what is it called? Outriders. That I'm kind of going through. I'm always interested in kind of the Destiny likes. I like the concept. We'll see. The demo has some issues, but I like a lot of what it's putting in. So that's probably what I'm going to be playing, for the next week or so, figuring out whether or not I like it. So thanks to everybody for asking questions, for coming in here. Again, as we've talked about in prior videos, we absolutely need the support. We love the support. I'm going to, continue to try to grow this thing and do more stuff. I have some ideas for some other series. We'll see if we can bring them into fruition, because I do actually have to, keep the lights on and pay for the firm and the family. But if you're interested in supporting the channel, Patreon. If you're interested in making sure you get your question answered, check out the Patreon. That $10 a month level does get you questions. There is a post that I put up that asks for questions. We do have a number of $10 supporters, but you can get those questions put on those posts, and presuming they don't violate the individual legal advice or personal restrictions, I will try to make sure to get that question answered on the next question time, which hopefully the plan is to do monthly, probably at the tail end of the month, probably Saturday mornings. That's what works the best for me. We'll see what happens in March, because I might be traveling. But absolutely, thank you so much to everybody for supporting the channel, for helping get the word out there, for telling your friends, for subscribing, for hitting bells, and everything else. I very, very much appreciate it, and I will check you out on the next episode of Virtual Legality.